When the internet began, bulletin board services, or BBS, became the first online communities of the so-called information superhighway. Using their phone lines, people logged in from all over America to talk about sports, games, movies, and on one BBS in particular, share their ghost stories. Over time, those communities all went dark, except for one lone server that continues to operate somewhere in an unknown part of Pennsylvania's Rust Belt. A relic of the 1990s, veiled in mystery, it is a digital archive of humanity's strangest encounters with the unknown, as told by the people who experienced them. My name is Brandon Schexnayder, and you are listening to Fear Daily.
Subject: the man who smelled like rain. User: Petra4Zoxo. Posted October 19th, 1996.
When I opened the door, it was his eyes that drew me in first. They were warm and kind, and all the anxiety I had from the knocking just dripped away like the rain off his shoulders. He didn't look dangerous, just tired, weather-worn, like he'd been walking for miles in that late summer downpour, the kind that made the pine trees tremble and turned the garden path to slush. My car broke down up the road, he said, his voice low and honeyed with a southern lilt. Didn't mean to scare you, ma'am. You didn't, I lied, clutching my robe tighter. You'll catch pneumonia out there. Come in. He stepped over the threshold without hesitation. That should have been the first red flag. No questions, no pause, but I wasn't thinking clearly. I hadn't spoken to another soul in days. My boys had called, left messages, but they were busy with lives of their own, and ever since Frank passed, this house had grown louder in the silence. That night, the rain wasn't enough to drown it out. I made coffee, he took it black, sat at the kitchen table like he belonged there, said his name was Caleb Rowan, said he was staying with friends out past the dunes, but never named them. We talked about nothing, weather, traffic, gardenias. I told him about Frank, and he listened like he'd known him. Then, as quickly as he came, he left. No ride, no headlights down the road, just gone. I checked the porch 5 minutes later, and there weren't even footprints in the mud. The next time he showed up, it was raining again. Thunder this time, early fall. I was watching an old Western on VHS and jumping at every crack in the sky. When the knock came, I was almost glad for it. Almost. Same warm smile, same soft voice. No explanation for how he got there, but I didn't press. Not yet. I let him in. This time, he brought a bottle of wine. Said he thought I might like a Cabernet, and I did. We drank on the back porch, listening to the frogs and the cicadas argue in the dark. I asked him how he knew what I liked, and he smiled like I'd told him once already. You ever smell something that reminds you of someone you've never met? He asked, out of nowhere. I laughed. That's not how memory works. Maybe not yours, he said. He always smelled like rain. Not mildew or sweat, but like the moment the sky opens up after a long drought, like wet dirt and electricity. I started craving it, watching the forecasts like a school kid waiting for snow. I'd curl my hair, light candles. By the third visit, I was wearing perfume again. We danced in the kitchen that night. It was silly and slow and awkward at first, but he had this way of leading. Like he remembered the steps to a song I'd never learned. When the lightning flashed, he looked at me like I was 25 again, and that's when I kissed him. He pulled away just a breath and whispered, "You even taste the same." I started asking questions after that. Where he was from, why he only came in the rain, why he always left before sunrise. He deflected with charm, with quiet little riddles and one-word answers. I didn't push too hard. I didn't want to scare the magic away, but there were cracks. Like the way he never blinked during storms, or the night I found his shirt still hanging in my hallway closet, dry as a bone, even though it'd been soaked when he arrived. The photo of Frank on the mantle fell face down during that visit. I picked it up and saw a thin crack in the glass, diagonal and clean, like a fault line. Still, I didn't stop. I told myself I deserved happiness, that maybe this was a gift, maybe grief had made me open enough to let something strange in, something sacred. Then the neighbor, Patty, asked me who I'd been dancing with last Tuesday night. "You were twirling around like a debutante," she said. "Looked adorable, but you were all by yourself." I laughed it off, but my stomach turned. I started checking the yard after he left, always after the rain. One night, I found footprints, barefoot, deep and clear, but they only started halfway down the path, like he hadn't walked in, like he'd stepped out of thin air. So I decided to break the pattern. Left the porch light on, set the table for two, made chicken piccata, and waited while a perfectly sunny sky faded into dusk. I left the screen door unlatched. I lit every candle I had, but Caleb never came. The next day, no rain. Then another. A whole week passed, dry and bright, and I felt empty again, like I'd dreamed it all. I stopped sleeping, started pacing. I called the local library to see if they had town records going back more than 20 years. Mrs. Dudley, the archivist, was happy to help. I drove down there with my heart in my throat, and it took 2 long hours, but I found it. October 4th, 1973. Caleb Rowan, age 29, presumed dead after attempting to rescue wife during Hurricane Iris. Body never recovered. They had lived in the old clapboard house down the road, the one that washed away in '78. I remembered the stories, everyone did. A local legend, a sad one. I stared at the photo in the paper, same eyes, same smile, a younger version of the man who danced with me in my kitchen. When the next storm came, I knew it would be the last. Wind howled like a dying animal. Trees bent low. Gutters overflowed. I stood on the porch, soaked to the skin, waiting. He emerged from the woods like a memory that had never left. No umbrella, no shoes, just that same look of aching tenderness. "You knew," I said over the wind. "I hoped you wouldn't," he answered. "Why me?" "I never stopped looking for her," he said. "You felt like her, like home." I shook my head, "But I'm not her." "I know," he said, voice soft, "but I hoped maybe this time." The lightning struck a tree near the edge of my property, the air filled with static and smoke, and when I looked back, Caleb was gone. The next morning, everything was quiet. Not still, quiet. Like the house had exhaled. I made coffee, fed the cat, sat on the porch, and the sun was out. The birds were chirping, but the house smelled like rain.
Subject: Crazy Helen. User: SRVish2. Posted February 13th, 1997.
No one seems to know if Crazy Helen is actually homeless or just a freelance lunatic wandering the city in a powder blue sweatsuit, swinging a duffel bag-sized purse that looks heavy enough to be full of bowling balls or bars of Nazi gold. I first met her in one of my post-cigarette refractory periods. I 10-bar in a kitschy tourist spot on the West Coast that caters primarily to people adventurous enough to wander off the cruise ship, but dull enough to order the same beer they do at home. I'm not a smoker exactly, but sometimes I like to smoke. I know it's bad for you. I know it's getting more expensive every day, and I do not care in the slightest. Once or twice a week, the machine craves nicotine, and I'm all too happy to answer the call. My whole family smokes like a Pontiac Tempest trying to crest a hill, so I figure my lighting up every now and then is at most a minor sin, and to keep the balance, I say a couple Hail Marys and a novena after each one. Or at least, I think about doing it. Besides, if you've ever worked in the service industry, you know that popping outside for a dart is the only way you ever get a break. I was out behind the bar, sitting on the tattered lawn chair that qualifies as the bar's official smoke pit, when I heard a rough, vaguely feminine voice croak out, "Fucking idiot." I'm not unused to being called that, but it usually happens when I'm behind a bar checking ID, so it was with some confusion that I turned around to see the source. She stood at the mouth of the alley, her white hair hanging down past her shoulders, the purse's strap digging into her shoulder like they were at a party and didn't know anyone there. "Excuse me?" Crazy Helen spat. "You heard me, fucking idiot. You don't even smoke. Fake smoker. Enjoy drowning in your own bed, asshole." Her point stated, she nodded stiffly and shuffled off. Back inside, I must have had a look on my face because Scotty, the barback, asked me who died. No one. Well, some old lady just said I was going to, so me? At least eventually, I guess. He laughed and took a break from restocking glasses to push his perfect sun-bleached hair back behind one ear. The beautiful son of a bitch. "So you met Crazy Helen? You're officially official. Everyone who works here meets her eventually. So what's her deal?" He shrugged, and as he spoke, he kept neatly lining up glassware in the cabinets. "She's crazy. She says crazy things, makes predictions. She told our waitress, Stacy, that someone was going to cut her heart out, but she's walking the floor over at Berrybeard's now, still probably mixing up drink orders and kiting other people's tips." That was a relief. So she's like one of those street preachers talking about the end of the world. You get a couple right because eventually someone has to die. Scotty stopped, his hand resting on the bottom of an upturned glass. "Well, kind of. The thing is, sometimes she says crazy shit and gets it right." The collar of my shirt started to feel a little too tight. "What do you mean?" "A couple years back, she told our prep cook Barry that he was going to get fucked by a train and a tugboat at the same time." It was my turn to laugh, but when Scotty looked up at me, there wasn't even the hint of a smile on his face. "What? You can't be serious. How can any part of that be right?" "Remember that big derailment down in Alabama in '93? In '93, I was working at Paradox in Baltimore and so high most of the time I couldn't have told you what year it was, never mind whether or not a train had derailed in Gooch Sweat, Oklahoma. I told Scotty as much without quite so much detail. I'd only been working at the bar for a few months, and so everyone there only knew the new, relatively sober me, and I wanted to keep it that way. He nodded somberly, then kept going. Short version is, a tugboat ran into a train bridge. Not hard enough to knock it down, but just enough to knock the tracks out of alignment. When the Amtrak hit it, boom. Off the rails, down into the water, killed a lot of people, including Barry's family. His parents, brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, they were coming here for his wedding. Man got fucked by a train and a tugboat at the same time. Just then, a group of boring but thirsty cruise passengers stampeded through the door, ending our conversation. I poured pint after pint of bad rice water, the repetition driving the entire subject from my mind until it slowed down just before closing time. I was out back again, a camel halfway to my lips, when I heard Helen's voice again. "Enjoy drowning in your own bed, asshole." I whirled around, but she wasn't there. Looking from the mouth of the alley down to the cigarette pinched between my fingers, I examined its smooth white surface and orange filter. There's something undeniably satisfying about smoking, and I wouldn't have thought I was doing enough of it to cause myself real trouble, and yet, Barry. Maybe betting against Crazy Helen wasn't the smart play. I pitched the unlit cigarette onto the ground.
Fear Daily is an independent podcast hosted by Brandon Schexnayder and written by Brennan Storr, with Joanna Smith serving as the consulting editor, audio production by Rachel Boyd, and sound design by Southern Gothic Media. This podcast is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real events or locations, is entirely coincidental. Ad-free versions of Fear Daily are available now on your favorite podcast apps. For more information, visit feardaily.com. But move fast, before the server goes offline.